Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? He arrived before the sun even considered rising. Every morning, just past 4:30 a.m., Frank Delaney walked through the quiet east gate of Raleigh Military Academy. The guards barely looked up anymore. He wasn't on their radar, not really. Pushing his battered supply cart with a squeaky wheel and a rusted handle, he made his way silently across the courtyard, his boots thudding softly against the stone, and then, like clockwork, he vanished inside. The halls were always empty at that hour. Too early for instructors, too late for night guards. It was his hour, his silence. He didn't wear a badge, he didn't wear a smile, and he never, ever spoke. Unless someone forced it out of him, he was just the janitor. Grey cap pulled low, brown work boots with frayed laces, a faded uniform at least 2 sizes too big. His shoulders were broad but slouched from years of unnoticed labor. His limp, subtle but permanent, echoed faintly with every third step. The students passed him every day, never stopping to look. He was invisible by design. Faculty barely nodded. He wasn't on any rosters, didn't attend any meetings, never showed up at staff lunches. He didn't even use the parking lot. He walked from town, 3 miles each way, and yet every single morning without fail, he swept the floors of the Hall of Merit, a long corridor bathed in natural light, where golden plaques displayed the names of the Academy's most distinguished graduates, generals, advisors, legends. Every year a new name was added, and every time he passed the last frame he paused, just for a second longer than he should have. There was a new name now. Cadet Liam Delaney, class of 2025. Honor cadet. Top of his class, his son. Liam didn't know the man pushing the mop bucket just 3 feet away was his father. He had never seen Frank without the beard, without the cap, or without the limp. Time had buried the man he once knew, if he ever knew him at all, and Frank had made sure of it. 17 years had passed since Frank had walked out of his son's life. Not with a bang, not even with a goodbye. No custody battles, no angry letters, just silence. He had vanished quietly, like a soldier fading into a fog of dishonor. Back then, Frank was wrecked. He'd been discharged from the army under a cloud of shame, insubordination, all because he had dared to report a superior officer for falsifying combat data. The truth cost him everything: his reputation, his uniform, his family, including the only thing he still cared about. Liam. For a decade, Frank had said nothing. He drifted through odd jobs, slept in borrowed rooms, grew older and quieter, until one day an ad for a janitorial position at Raleigh Military Academy found its way into his weathered mailbox. He didn't apply. He just showed up. No one stopped him. No one asked questions. And so, for 6 years, he swept the same hall, his son's hall, and watched in secret as the boy he lost became the man he could never be. Liam was a model cadet, focused, respected, principled, the kind of leader Frank had once imagined he'd raise if life had gone differently. And now, in his final year, Liam had earned the highest honor of all, valedictorian. The speech was scheduled for the Hall of Merit, the very floor Frank had polished every morning. "Who's cleaning the podium?" a junior officer asked casually that afternoon. "Don't worry about it," another shrugged. "That janitor guy's already on it. Shows up early, never says much." No one gave it a second thought, but Frank had already begun wiping it down, methodically, carefully, like it mattered more than anything else he'd ever cleaned. That night the hall was empty. Frank stood in the center, staring at the new plaque. He ran his calloused hand gently along the edge of his son's name, gold letters catching the light. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just whispered, "You did it, kid." But the next day, everything would change, because on graduation day, Liam Delaney's perfect speech wouldn't go according to plan, and the man everyone called just the janitor would do something no one would forget. The auditorium glowed with ceremony. Banners hung from the rafters. Flags stood tall behind the podium. Rows upon rows of cadets sat stiff in their pressed uniforms, medals glinting beneath the bright lights. Families whispered in the audience, scanning the crowd for their sons and daughters. It was the kind of morning when pride filled the room before anyone even spoke, and at the very back, partially obscured by a concrete column, stood Frank Delaney. No name tag, no dress uniform. Just his usual cap, pulled low over his eyes, and his hands buried deep in the pockets of a faded jacket. He stood near the exit, as if he might need to slip out quickly, but he didn't move. Instead, he watched as his son, Liam Delaney, honor cadet, class of 2025, rose from the front row, approached the stage, and took his place at the podium. Liam's posture was perfect. Not rigid, but composed, confident, earned. He didn't need notes. He'd rehearsed his speech for weeks. Every word had been tested for tone, clarity, and impact. He cleared his throat. "Good morning, commandants, instructors, parents, fellow cadets." His voice carried like a bell across the silent hall. Frank didn't breathe. Liam spoke of legacy, of honor, of duty to something greater than oneself. He referenced the Academy's long tradition of producing leaders, not just warriors. He mentioned his instructors, his classmates, even those who had fallen short but pushed others forward. But then, something broke his rhythm. Mid-sentence, Liam looked up, and his eyes caught movement in the very back of the hall. A man, alone. Still, he didn't know him, not consciously, but something in his chest twisted, a pressure, a pulse. Frank looked down, his cap hiding his expression. He hadn't planned to stay this long. Liam blinked, trying to shake the moment, but his speech faltered for just half a beat. His voice wavered, barely perceptible, but enough for the commandant to glance sideways. Liam recovered quickly, finished his final sentence, closed his speech with strength and pride. The audience stood in applause. The cadets clapped sharply, their palms in sync. Proud parents wiped away tears. Cameras flashed from every angle. But Liam. He scanned the back wall again. The man was gone. Behind the building, Frank leaned against the side wall, hands trembling slightly as he lit a cigarette. He hadn't smoked in years, but this day had dragged something out of him. Something raw. Something unfinished. Footsteps interrupted the quiet. Frank turned to see Major Ellison, one of the Academy's longest-serving instructors. Older than Frank, but no less sharp. "I saw you in there," Ellison said, voice low. Frank didn't respond. "I know who you are." Still silence. "I'm not here to make a scene," Ellison added. "I came to ask one thing. Why now?" Frank took a slow drag from the cigarette. "I just wanted to see him," he said finally. "One time, on the day he became everything I couldn't be." Ellison looked at him carefully, not with judgment but with understanding. "He doesn't know?" he asked. Frank shook his head. "And he's better off that way." Ellison didn't argue. He just nodded, then turned and walked away. Frank stayed behind, smoke curling in the cool air, the applause from inside still echoing faintly through the stone. Later that evening, Liam sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at his phone. He was rewatching his speech from a cadet's live stream. It was solid, poised, precise, but something was bothering him. He paused the video, zoomed in on the back row. There. That man, the cap, the beard, the posture. He didn't know who he was, but he knew that look. Not like a stranger, not like an officer, like someone who had watched him before too long, too quietly, someone who didn't clap, someone who knew too much. Liam couldn't shake the image. That man in the back row, silent still, had unsettled something in him. Not fear, not even curiosity. Something deeper, something he couldn't name. The next day, instead of heading to the morning debrief, Liam took a detour into the administration building. He flashed his credentials, requested access to Academy employment records, and waited. A clerk handed him a printed sheet without looking up. Franklin Delaney Facilities Staff, janitorial, no photo, no birth date, no prior service listed. Start date, 6 years ago. But Liam had never seen him before this week. He flipped the sheet over. A red stamp bled through the paper. File partially. Sealed. Article 12. Why would a janitor have a sealed file? He needed answers. That evening, instead of going to the awards reception, Liam walked the lower halls, the parts of the school cadets rarely saw. Pipes buzzed overhead. The smell of bleach hung in the air. He found the supply closet open. Tools lined the walls. Mops, gloves, old radios. Frank was there, adjusting a broken mop handle, as if it were a rifle. Liam stood in the doorway. "You... the one who cleans the Hall of Merit?" Frank didn't look up. "That's me. I think I've seen you before." Frank kept working. "Lot of people walk by me." Liam stepped inside. "You looked at me like you knew me." Now Frank looked up. His eyes were sharp, tired. "I know what it's like to stand alone in front of a crowd," he said. "That's all." Liam didn't push. Instead, he placed a folded copy of his speech on the shelf. "In case you wanted to read it," he said. Frank said nothing. Liam left. Hours passed. Frank didn't touch the envelope, but eventually he opened it. Inside, typed in clean black ink, was Liam's speech. At the bottom, handwritten in blue pen, "To the man who made the hall shine, thank you for letting me stand on clean ground." LD Frank's hand trembled. The next morning, Liam was called into Major Ellison's office. "You've been asking about Frank Delaney." Liam didn't deny it. Ellison opened a desk drawer. From it, he pulled an old envelope, yellowed edges. "Military seal." He slid it across the table. Liam opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, a younger man in fatigues, standing beside a smoldering Humvee, a wounded soldier on his back, blood across his arm. The name tag visible. F. Delaney. Liam stared at it. His chest tightened. That face, those eyes. It was him, the janitor. The photo wouldn't leave his hands. Liam sat at the edge of his bunk. The academy lights dimmed. The dorm hushed. In his lap lay the image of a younger man, dirt-smudged and bloodied, carrying a wounded soldier across burning rubble. The tag on his chest read F. Delaney, the same man who'd been mopping the Hall of Merit just days ago. His heart pounded. His breathing slowed. A dozen thoughts collided in his mind, but one pushed through louder than the rest. Was this man my father? He reached for his phone. His mother answered on the third ring. "Liam, everything okay?" He hesitated. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." She was quiet. "Who was my father?" She took a breath, shaky and slow. "His name was Frank," she said. "Franklin Delaney." The silence after her answer felt like a crack in a frozen lake, thin, fragile, about to collapse. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he whispered. "Because you were too young when he left. And when he didn't come back, I thought it was better that way." "What happened?" Her voice broke. "He served. Army logistics. He reported his superior for falsifying records. They called it insubordination. Stripped his rank, erased his pension, and blacklisted him. He lost everything, including you." Liam closed his eyes. "Did he ever try to reach me?" "I don't know," she said. "They sealed everything. After the discharge, he disappeared." Liam ended the call without a word. The next morning he walked the halls in a haze. No salute felt real. No routine seemed steady. He walked past cadets and instructors like he didn't hear them, and then, without thinking, he took a sharp turn and found himself once again in the janitor's corridor. Frank was standing by a locker, loading supplies. This time, Liam didn't. "Wait, you're him." Frank didn't move. "You were in Kandahar. You carried a wounded man through fire. I saw the photo." Frank looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. "That was a long time ago," he said. Liam's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you say anything?" Because it wouldn't have helped either of us, Frank replied. Your name's on that wall, mine's not. But I deserve to know who you are, Liam said, barely containing the emotion in his voice. You've been watching me like I'm a stranger. I had no right to be more, Frank said softly. They stood in silence. Neither of them moved. Liam finally spoke. I submitted a nomination for you. Frank blinked. For what? For recognition, Liam said. A plaque. Something. They rejected it. Frank gave a bitter laugh. Of course, they did. I'm not someone they want remembered. But I do. Frank looked away. His hands, worn and strong, gripped the edge of the mop handle like it was the last solid thing in the world. Later that night, Liam opened his laptop and began typing. Not a speech, not a report, a post. He uploaded the Kandahar photo. Then the citation that was never awarded. Then the internal file Ellison had shown him. He wrote, This man saved lives, then lost his name for telling the truth. Now he sweeps our floors. But I know who he is. And now, so do you. He clicked publish, and the silence that had followed Frank Delaney for years was about to be broken. The post didn't explode. It simmered. By morning, it had over 400 views on the internal cadet network. By lunch, instructors were murmuring in the hallways. By evening, the academy's faculty inboxes were full of questions. Some curious, some outraged, some deeply unsettled. Cadets whispered the name in passing. Frank Delaney. They shared the grainy photo from Kandahar like a ghost story. A forgotten soldier who never asked to be seen, finally exposed to light. Major Ellison was the first to confront Liam. You went public. I told the truth, Liam said. That truth has consequences. Liam stood straighter. So does silence? Ellison didn't respond right away, but when he finally did, his voice was lower. I warned you they wouldn't accept it. I'm not asking for permission anymore. 2 days later, the Academy's commandant summoned Liam to his office. The room was high-ceilinged, lined with flags and mahogany bookshelves. It smelled like leather and old decisions. The commandant stood by the window, holding the printout of Liam's post. You've forced a conversation, he said. I didn't force anything. I revealed what you tried to bury. The commandant turned. There are protocols, Cadet Delaney. Structures we maintain, histories we protect. Liam stepped forward. He protected lives. The history you buried is the one that taught me who I am. The commandant stared at him for a long frozen second. Then, surprisingly, he sat down. Did he ever ask you to do this? He asked. No, Liam replied. Good, the man said. Then maybe this wasn't about him at all. Maybe it was about you. Liam didn't flinch. Maybe it's finally about both of us. Outside, Frank continued his usual route. He didn't carry a phone, didn't check the network, but he noticed the looks. Cadets started nodding when they passed him. Some even whispered, Sir, out of habit. He didn't know what had changed until Ellison stopped him by the mess hall door. Your name's on every screen this week, Ellison said. Frank narrowed his eyes. What did he do? Your son told the truth. That night, Liam sat beside Frank on the bleachers overlooking the silent drill field. I made them look at you, Liam said. Frank didn't speak for a while. When he did, it was barely above, a whisper. I spent 17 years thinking you'd be better off never knowing me. I'm not. Frank exhaled deeply. Then I guess I don't have to disappear again. Liam pulled a folded envelope from his jacket. They still won't approve a formal plaque, but they gave me this. Frank opened it. Inside was a single line, signed by the commandant. Honor exists in action, not in archives. There was no title, no medal, but for the first time in years someone had written his name onto his face. The following morning, the cafeteria was louder than usual. A student-run newsletter had printed a full-page spread. The ghost who saved men and swept floors, and beneath it the image of a young soldier carrying bloodied weight through fire. The name was no longer hidden. The story was no longer secret. They started calling him instructor by mistake, not because he wore the badge he didn't, not because he spoke in class he hadn't, but because people had begun to see him, and they didn't know what else to call a man who had earned that much respect, yet walked the halls with a mop in his hands. Frank Delaney kept his head down as always. He arrived early, left late, but now cadets would stop him, ask about maintenance, and then pivot to Kandahar. Is it true? Were you really discharged for saving people? Why didn't you fight back? He never gave long answers. Sometimes he'd say, "Not everything worth doing gets a parade." Other times, "Some fights you win by walking away." But the truth was, he had stopped fighting a long time ago. At least, until Liam. At week's end, the commandant sent a formal request. Frank didn't believe it at first. A typed letter, delivered by hand, sealed with the academy crest. Mr. Franklin Delaney is hereby invited to serve as guest instructor in leadership and ethics, fall term. It didn't come with a salary, didn't come with honors. It came with a classroom and a nameplate on the door. Liam found him sitting under the old oak behind the dorms, letter in hand. "You going to take it?" Frank shook his head. "Feels strange." Liam sat beside him. "You already teach more than anyone here. You just don't stand in front of a board." Frank studied the sky. What if they only want a symbol, not a person? Then make them see the person. The first day of class came quietly. No announcement. No press, just Frank, now in a clean shirt and ironed slacks, walking into a small classroom at 07 door sharp. 10 cadets waited. Most were there out of curiosity, a few out of respect. Frank stood at the front. He didn't smile. He didn't read. From a slide he simply said, "What you learn in this place can make you a leader. What you survive outside these walls makes you a human being." He paused, then added, "I learned the second part first." No one said a word. But no one looked away either. Word spread fast. His class filled in 2 days. The janitor who saved a unit in Afghanistan. The man whose son stood at the top of the class, now standing before cadets who were raised on rank and regulation, teaching them what the books couldn't. That evening, Frank stood in the Hall of Merit again. This time, not alone. Liam stood beside him. Both stared at the golden plaque. Cadet Liam Delaney, Honor Cadet, 2025. And below it, a newly added inscription, barely approved, quietly placed, Instructor Franklin Delaney, Unspoken Merit, 2009-2025. Frank didn't cry, didn't smile. But for the first time in decades he stood straight. Fall turned the academy grounds amber and gold. The trees lining the parade field shed their leaves in soft spirals, coating the concrete paths like a quiet farewell to summer. Cadets marched through it all, boots crisp, voices sharp. But now, when they passed the man in the navy blue sweater and pressed khakis, they didn't look through him. They nodded. Some saluted, because Frank Delaney was no longer invisible. His lecture room, once half filled with curious eyes, had a wait list. Cadets showed up early, notebooks ready, not for grades, but for the stories that didn't come from textbooks. He never spoke about medals, never showed photos. Instead, he asked one question on the board each week. What would you do if no one was watching? One evening after his last class, Frank found Liam waiting on the old wooden bench behind the gym. They hadn't spoken much during the term, not out of discomfort, but out of something harder to define. Mutual respect, time, healing. Liam handed him a letter. Frank raised an eyebrow. "It's from DC," Liam said. "I didn't open it." Frank unfolded the envelope slowly. Inside was an official army document. Recommendation for reinstatement of service record. Franklin R. Delaney. Status under review. He blinked twice. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I know," Liam replied, "but your story got farther than we thought. Some of your old units spoke up. They sent letters. One even testified." Frank stared at the signature at the bottom. Someone had written the truth down. Finally. The next morning, during the Academy's Founders' Day ceremony, the commandant stepped to the podium. He didn't speak long, no drawn-out speech. No theatrics, he simply said, "Leadership is often loud, but the best kind is quiet, and we are proud to honor one such leader today." Then he turned to Frank, seated quietly in the third row, and gestured to the Hall of Merit's south, while a curtain dropped. Underneath, a full-length photograph of a man not in uniform, but in his civilian clothes, stood holding a mop and a folder. The plaque read, "Franklin Delaney, instructor, veteran father. Proof that character is forged when no one's watching." The entire room stood. Frank didn't. He stayed seated, head bowed, eyes wet. Only when Liam placed a hand on his shoulder did he rise. No speech, no salute, just presence. And it was enough. That night, they walked the campus together, father and son, past the lit-up classrooms, past the Hall of Merit, toward the East Gate where Frank used to begin every day in silence. "Thinking about leaving?" Liam asked. Frank shook his head slowly. "For the first time in my life," he said, "I think I finally arrived." They didn't say anything else. They didn't need to, because this was no longer a story about a janitor, or a soldier, or even her son. It was about a man who lost everything and found his name again, not by demanding it, but by showing up. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please share it. Someone out there needs to know that redemption is real, and that the quietest acts often carry the greatest weight. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stand tall, even when no one's watching.